Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on operating AFVs in extreme weather, which is jointly hosted by the ACT Expo and one of ACT Expo's presenting sponsors, the Propane Education and Research Council. My name is Patrick Couch, Project Director at Gladstein Neandros & Associates, or GNA. I'm excited to be leading today's conversation on the challenges and strategies for operating alternative fuel vehicles in regions with extreme temperatures. For those who are not familiar, GNA is a leading North American clean transportation and energy consulting firm. For the last 20 years, we've been working on a wide range of fleet operations with industry participants and other stakeholders to advance the commercialization and use of alternative fuels, including propane and natural gas, which you will hear about today. As part of these efforts, we created and produced the Alternative Clean Transportation Expo, or ACT Expo, which is the largest clean fleet conference and expo we believe in the world. It represents all alternative fuels and efficiency improvement technologies across all weight classes. Today's webinar is part of an ongoing series of webinars that ACT Expo is providing as a preview of the kind of programming that you can expect at the four-day event taking place May 4th through 7th in Dallas, Texas. As you're going to hear on today's webinar, there are absolutely incredible advancements being made in the world of alternative fuels. These markets have rapidly grown out of their infancy and are quickly maturing. This is evident by our two guest speakers today, who will discuss their real-life experiences of operating alternative fuel vehicles and technologies under extreme conditions, and how they apply their lessons learned to improve the safety and efficiency of their operations year after year. The developments over the past decade have truly been remarkable, and the progress we have seen is a direct result of pioneering fleet operators and fuel providers who continue to aggressively invest in alternative fuels. The distribution and use of alternative fuels continues to increase in scale, even in the coldest and hottest regions in the nation. We've already seen a few states with record-setting low temperatures and facility shutdowns due to snow this year, and with additional rounds of storms predicted in the coming weeks, this webinar really could not have come at a better time as harsh winter conditions continue to take their toll nationwide on thousands of drivers, fueling infrastructure, and of course, costly equipment. I'd like to now take a moment to thank our ACT Expo sponsor, the Propane Education and Research Council, or PERC. The only energy council of its kind, PERC leads safety and training efforts and drives technology development to expand the adoption of propane as a clean, domestic, and affordable energy source. As a leading alternative fuel, PERC recognizes the important role propane autogas plays in the clean transportation movement. Abundant, affordable, and American-made propane autogas attracts increasing numbers of fleet managers because it can help green their fleets while also adding green to their bottom line. I'm excited to lead today's conversation on engine performance, fuel reliability, and driver training specific to extreme weather operations. It is an honor to be joined by Tom Armstrong, ThyssenKrupp Elevator's Director of Fleet. Tom has been working in the corporate fleet management for the past 22 years and has been involved with alternative fuels since 2009. With nearly 100 propane autogas vans operating in Detroit, Phoenix, Seattle, Los Angeles, San Diego, and Houston, his experience with propane autogas in both extremely hot and cold climates is unrivaled. I'm also thrilled to have with us Carl Schur, the Superintendent of Fleet Operations for Convenience Transportation at Quick Trip. Carl is one of the most seasoned industry veterans in the natural gas industry. He managed the deployment of both compressed natural gas and liquefied natural gas vehicles in Quick Trip's fleet, and if that was not enough, Carl is also overseeing Quick Trip's maintenance facilities in the snowy Midwestern states of Wisconsin, Iowa, and Minnesota. Before we get started, there's just a few things to keep in mind as we go through each presentation. I encourage you to submit any questions you have for our speakers by using the Q&A box located in the lower right-hand corner of your screen. We'll be answering as many questions as we can following the presentations. Feel free to submit questions at any time and we'll add them to the queue as they come in. Also note that a full recording of today's webinar will be available for download on the ACT Expo website. You will receive an email with a link to this recording as a follow-up to today's webinar. We would also kindly ask that you complete our very quick 30-second survey, which will pop up at the end of the webinar. We really want your feedback so we can continue to improve these webinars going forward. Lastly, for any technical issues and assistance during the webinar, please feel free to contact Grace Jameson in our office at 310-570-3463 or at her email address visible on the screen, grace.jameson@gladstein.org. Without further ado, let's get started. I'll hand it over to you, Tom.
Hey, thanks, Pat. A lot of good information, and hopefully what we're going to present here will be some good insight to some of our experiences. So with that in mind, we are the largest producer of elevators in North America, one of the leading elevator companies in the world. World Trade Center is one of our signature projects. We run about 3,200 vehicles, currently up to about 8,500 propane vehicles. And as an industry leader in sustainability, it was important for us to take the same approach to our fleet, which led us to trying to identify the most capable alternative fuel vehicles for our fleet. In doing so, we found a lot of challenges, and we also found a lot of people pushing. The government pushes us, our executive pushes us. There's so many different ways to go. So the hardest part for us when we were doing it was trying to figure out, what was going to work best for us in, across North America. So in doing so, we created what we called the 5 C's of analyzing alternative fuels to help us weed through, the politics, and everything else that goes around alternative fuels. So those 5 C's: is it clean? Does it conserve? Is it cost effective? Does it make common sense? And can we actually commit? Are there actually vehicles out there that apply to our fleet? So with that in mind, we found propane is the only really alternative fuel that qualified for us under all 5 C's. Now you can apply these 5 C's to your fleet, and I'm not saying the outcome is going to be the same, but this is what worked for us. As Pat mentioned, we're currently in the green stars. We have 6 major cities, and in our fiscal year 2014, we've used 158,000 gallons of propane. A little bit of history on the price of propane. This dates back to 2012, May through current. Last year, in the extreme cold, there was an unforeseen spike in propane. Propane is used for a heating oil, which some attribute that to that. However, we experienced none of that this year. And I think if you look at this graph going backwards, that you would not see any type of spike like that. It really, from my understanding, it was an anomaly. Examples of some of our invoices that we're paying today. This particular one with tax, we're paying $1.30 a gallon. Another location, we're at $1.77, and these are all current in these cold months. In addition to fuel, we found about 5 other major buckets of us to help reduce our ROI tied to propane. And as we entered some of these cities, Phoenix, for example, we found reduced registration cost and HOV lane access as additional ROIs. In Los Angeles, they just shifted a little bit. And in Seattle, as you can see, they just shifted a little more. There's just some examples as we enter new cities and what we try to look for to help our return. Now, as far as propane regarding cold climates and that kind of stuff, propane was an issue based on the old carburetor systems back in the 70s and 80s. Regulators would freeze up. and you'd see a lack of power with vapor and fogging technology, and you'd experience significant loss of horsepower and torque. In today's technology, it's done through sequential fuel injection with the computer-controlled injections of the fuel into the engine. So today's liquid propane, really whether it's injected as a liquid or as a vapor, there's really no negative impact from the climate. I know Roush Industries has done some extensive testing in the Alaska region for DOT testing. I think this was done last winter, and they've had no negative impacts. Our cold climates that we operate in is Detroit. This is actually our branch office, where we have 2,000 gallons that the branch uses. This is another facility that we partnered with in Detroit. And this was actually taken this year, which it has been a tough year. So I mentioned we had to identify the right vehicles for our fleet. So the majority of our vehicles are service vehicles, operate a lot of vans, pickup trucks. We started to migrate to the F-650s, and we actually operate one of these F-650s out of the Detroit office. So this is an example or a list of our vehicles that we currently house in Detroit. As you can see, a lot of vans, some pickups. In Seattle, Everett area, these guys run all the way up to Vancouver. And this is our current propane inventory in that branch. So currently, with our vehicles going home with our drivers, it's really important for us to have range. So we actually put a bigger tank in our vehicles, and currently our vehicles operate on a dedicated propane system. And these vans have a 46 usable gallon tank with a range of about 460 miles. Now going forward, we're going to be looking at a biofuel system for our propane vans, and these will have a 38 usable gallon tank, which will offer us close to 500-mile range. Plus, we'll have a standard tank that'll give us a range of about 430. Now, our intentions here is not to really use the gas, but to alleviate some anxiety with some of our routes and drivers when we're running propane. So this will just be, I guess, this will just be an added benefit for us going forward in our service vehicles. The biofuel systems that we're going to be using, they'll start on gas and they convert to propane once the engine reaches a certain temperature. So again, as I mentioned, today's liquid propane, whether it's injected as a liquid or a vapor, has no negative impact on the climate. As I mentioned, we do install a bigger tank in our vans so we can get a greater range. This is just an example of the tank, the current location, and an interior package that we put in the van to work around that tank. For future, we do have a different tank, and it will be positioned differently to where it will not be impeding in the middle of our area. And I would like to, although this slide here is just a quick, one of our vendors is the Roush, and I don't know if anybody's are familiar with the Roush racing team, but Jack's daughter Susan does run a propane drag car, and you can't quote me, but I believe she's actually won races in this vehicle. I would like to add that I do not have any slides pertaining to it, but we do operate in Phoenix. Phoenix, we have about 18 propane vehicles. We have had zero issues with the heat, but our tank is inside our vehicle. So I would recommend anybody to ask the question to maybe some of the suppliers on the heat related to the asphalt and that kind of stuff. If you're running a tank in, say, Phoenix, that's exposed to the heat from the asphalt. And that being said, I think that concludes my presentation.
Great, thank you, Tom. That was a great presentation. You know, I noticed a couple of interesting points in your comments there. I think the first one that kind of stood out to me was that one of your C's was commit. Right, this is not a trial. This is you know, really being integrated into a long-term vision for your company and what fuels can you commit to down the road. So that was interesting. And the other thing I thought was kind of an interesting tie into the regional variability is that ROI varies by region almost as much as it seems the weather does. So some very interesting points there, and I see we already have some great questions coming in related to the presentation, which we will address at the end here. Before our next presenter, I wanted to quickly remind you to continue submitting your Q&A session, questions for the Q&A session using the box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. Next, we'll hear from Quick Trip's Superintendent of Fleet Operations, Carl Schur. Carl?
Patrick, thank you, and I'd like to thank G&A for the opportunity to participate today. Really, I guess, before I get to discussion of some of the cold weather, primarily I'm going to focus on cold weather conditions, but I'd like to go through a quick overview, Quick Trip, just convenience transportation, and then into really the heart of what Quick Trip, and I guess where Quick Trips comes in is we are a C-store operator, operate 460 C-stores in the upper Midwest, Wisconsin, Minnesota, Iowa, family-owned business, very vertically integrated, and that played well into our move to alternative fuels, because as we've looked at this, we're looking at it on two fronts. Really from the Quick Trip side, how did it fit into fueling infrastructure, and also on the fleet side, convenience transportation, which I'll talk mostly to that. But currently on the Quick Trips side, we have 32 operational stations. 31 of those are full semi-accessible locations, and we feel like with that, at least in our small footprint, have really put together a functional infrastructure. You know, our first entry into this was really our fleet alternative fuels center. It was really more of a lab. Really gave us a chance to not only experiment and test fueling, but also on the other side, there was a lot of things to learn as far as weights and measures, and you know, just accounting, point of sale. How does all this integrate? And really just making sure that we develop that comfort, both on the distribution side or infrastructure, and then on the fuel side. With convenience, you know, we operate obviously serving our stores. There are really two fleets. There's the heavy-duty fleet, which is convenience transportation that is taking care of our stores, and operate roughly 20 million miles a year doing that. We'll surpass this year that 20 million mile mark. But and then on the other side, we've got the automotive fleet, which is more store engineering, utility vehicle in the lower right, the cutaway with the utility body in the lower right is an example. That vehicle, for instance, is one of our natural gas technicians that is on the road every day of the week, servicing and maintaining the stations. And those systems are bi-fuel. In fact, we have primarily on the automotive side, almost everything we have is bi-fuel. So I guess kind of getting into this, why did we look at, you know, from the fleet side, you know, what really drove us to pursue natural gas was we're really looking for an alternative to diesel technology, which was really a challenge. Most of our runs, our petroleum trucks, for example, I mean, the average length of run is 75 miles. So they, you know, very challenged to produce the heat needed to be efficient in DPF regenerations and so forth. So we really started looking at these alternatives at the same time Quick Trip was looking on the other side. So we got into it. Obviously, the fuel price advantage and stability of natural gas was appealing. And it really drove a, you know, positive ROI that really made it feasible for us to try it. And even without, I know there's always discussion of incentives and that sort of thing. In our region, there are very few programs. None of the states that we operate in have really any active programs. I mean, there are some things that come up through clean cities and such, but there's nothing on a day-to-day basis. So we really went into this from a cost standpoint, assuming that none of this was going to be incentivized. So from that standpoint, the fuel cost itself was appealing. But as we got into it, we really took the same approach that, you know, kind of that shotgun approach. We wanted to assess as many options as practically possible. I mean, the first time we went out and bought vehicles, we bought basically one of everything we could get our hands on. You know, that and from every OE, and you know, it gave us a chance to see what different OEs were doing. It gave us a chance to see what the support at the dealership level and such was, and really just that was how we initiated it and launched into it. Now, you know, some of the things that we've learned along the way. Tom hit on the range anxiety. You know, I was one that, quite honestly, prior to actually driving a natural gas vehicle, I was probably prone to kind of scoff at the idea of range anxiety, but it is real. The first time I got in a vehicle, I probably spent more time with my eyes on the fuel gauge than looking down the road. But without temperature compensated gauges, which I know are out there now, and I think as we roll into vehicles that are equipped with those, that all goes away. But right now we use basically charts. Like you'll see a couple cutouts of some of the charts on the right side of the screen there. Every truck we have has a chart in it. Really ranges from 100 degrees to minus 25 degrees, which is really the range of temperatures that we'll operate in. Gives the operator a way to equate, you know, what his current tank pressure is and what the ambient temperature is to, you know, gallons on board. So that's helped a lot ease that with our drivers. You know, and there has been a lot of training that goes into this, whether it's driver training, you know, obviously on the maintenance side, it's been a big shift in our focus internally in our maintenance departments, and really then just even the safety side. But you know, I'm just going to mention a few things on that. One thing, we strongly believe in tank inspections. I mean, right now I've got 4 certified inspectors. I've got 5 more that are in training. You know, but we really think that's an important element. I mean, part of buying this equipment and putting it out on the road is really getting engaged and understanding that. And you know, it's like any piece of equipment. Ownership has its obligations, and that obligation is to maintain that equipment. And we think tank inspections are very important in this with natural gas, and even on the technology side, the engine side. I mean, maintenance intervals. You know, we feel very adamant that these need to be adhered to. Kind of goes back to that training, getting drivers to train the fuel filter daily, down to making sure you're on schedule for every phase of maintenance, you know, running overhead, etc. And the other thing is that, you know, we found that natural gas is not a cure for operating in cold temperatures. And I guess that really gets to kind of the focus for today on what I was going to talk to. You know, what we have found, and I don't want to make any of this sound like these are real challenges. What we have found is that with natural gas, it's kind of some different problems, but operating natural gas in severe and cold temperatures is no more problematic than operating diesel equipment. Just the different sets of opportunities, if you will, or challenges to address and overcome. Starting out with fueling, you know, the cold ambient conditions, you know, you start getting the cooling as the gas expands into these tanks. It can create some problems. I mean, it's rare. It happens really on an occasional basis, especially with the heavy duty. We see very few problems there. The only time we really feel like we need to take a little extra care is in those situations where we may have had a vehicle in the shop and for some reason had to have it defueled. When we go to refuel it in cold conditions, we're going to introduce the fuel really in segments. We're not going to take that out to the fuel island and just hit it and try to go from 0 to you know, 2,400 psi or whatever it would be for that day. We're going to, you know, gradually introduce the fuel, let it stabilize a little bit. And that's not really a challenge because we're doing that from a maintenance standpoint. Where we really see the biggest area of opportunity, I guess, is in making sure our automotive drivers understand this. With them driving bi-fuel vehicles, a lot of times they will want to they'll run the vehicle when they'll run it out of natural gas, you know, or very close, and then start looking to fuel. And because of the nature of these vehicles, you know, that they can continue to run even if they deplete their CNG storage, they're more prone to getting that empty tank into that empty or near depleted tank status. And, you know, at that point, when they fast fuel, we have seen O-ring leakage and such, and that, you know, that really tends to be the biggest fueling challenge. Cold weather operation on the truck side. We see most of the problems related to operational problems really revolve around the CAC and the moisture generated by the charge air coolers, or the condensation that happens as that warm air is being cooled in the CAC. It generates moisture and can be a challenge. Now, this is not unique to the natural gas engine. We've had similar situations. I mean, by way of example, I guess recently we just sold the last of a group of trucks that diesel trucks that if we didn't properly control that moisture in the CAC, they were prone to taking a chunk of ice into cylinder number 2, and they turn the connecting rod basically into a horseshoe. So this is a problem no matter what kind of vehicle you're running in cold. Now, for us up here, you know, we really have found that the best tools we have in operating these vehicles, and last year gave us a great opportunity. I mean, there was a period of time where for 20 plus days, we never saw a positive temperature. I mean, everything, we were in the below zero for that extended period. And through that, with the use of winter fronts, and one other thing that we've done is we've put drains in the CACs so that as moisture builds, if it accumulates down in the bottom of these charged air coolers, we can get it out of there. Those are probably the biggest tools, and I guess what we're really trying to protect is the water moving from that CAC and adversely affecting the operation, and this is not only engine related. I mean, you know, obviously it can have some effect. We've seen it show up in different areas of the engine, but it also gets channeled into the truck air compressor system, which you know, it really is essential to our brake operation and a lot of other systems on the truck. So that's really the focus of what we try to control in the cold. You know, and our general rules on that are that 30 degrees or colder, we want the winter fronts on. Mentioned the drains. I mean, we run a solenoid automated valve. No others are running manual. You know, one is arguably as good as the other. It really depends on your operation and how you train your people. And the other is to really let these engines warm up. We want them at least 100, up in that 155, 165 range or warmer before they leave the yard anytime, especially when the temperatures are at -10 or colder. You know, in extreme cold, and we have rarely had to do this, in extreme cold, and you know, -25 degrees or colder, we will at times, we have at times rerouted the intake to draw just off the engine compartment, and you know, to that Cummins has put out, you know, some guides on cold weather operation. There's some things in there, quite honestly, a little more exotic than what we've had to do. I mean, we just take care of the basics, and these trucks run very well. Right now, you know, we've found that that platform that we were looking for. We have found a vehicle that, for us, gives us operational stability. Our uptime productivity when these trucks are out on the road is the best we've seen in many years. And we think we've moved down the right path. I mean, right now in the heavy duty area, 51% of our fleet is currently natural gas with the equipment that's on order. But when we receive that this year, we'll be just short of 2/3 of the fleet. And our goal at this point, and don't see any reason to deviate from that, is 100% natural gas operation on the heavy duty side. Automotive side, you know, I think right now that's a much smaller percentage. We're at about 12 to 13% of our automotive fleet being natural gas, but you know, that'll mature at a much slower rate. But on the heavy duty side, we went into this looking for a solution, and with natural gas, we feel we found it. and we've shown over the last couple of years that we can operate in really any weather condition. For that, I just thank you for your time and turn it back over to Patrick.
Great, Carl. Thank you. That was a very informative presentation, and I think you brought up a fantastic perspective, which is that even though gasoline and diesel vehicles are the incumbents in today's fleets, they're not without their problems in extreme weather situations, and it's a matter of learning how to run that vehicle in the conditions that your fleet has to operate in. So it looks like we've received a number of questions. At this time, we'd like to transition to the moderated question and answer portion of the webinar. Thanks to all of our attendees today for submitting your great questions along the way. We may not be able to address all of them, but we'll do our best. And again, as we go along here, if you have any questions that occur to you, feel free to continue submitting them. Our first question is regarding engine performance changes due to cold weather. Have either of you seen any changes in engine performance in parameters like launch torque, peak horsepower, any sorts of performance issues on that side of things?
We really haven't seen anything. I mean, with that, our drivers would be real quick to tell us if they weren't getting the performance. Quite honestly, I think as long as these trucks are running, that was the big focus, is how do you control all the things that give you the uptime. From there, on a performance basis, it's been very positive. We ran a comparable size diesel right now with the 12 liters at 400, 1450 torque. We're running diesels that were exact same horsepower and torque rating. So our drivers like the performance. In fact, whether it's summer or winter, they'll tell us that on the flats or on the long pull, they feel the natural gas outperforms the diesel. In the rolling hills, things like that, they like the direct injection of the diesel. They feel that it's a little more responsive in that. But overall, the driver feedback has been very positive from that horsepower torque standpoint.
Can you hear me okay, Pat?
Yes.
Yeah, from a propane perspective, we've experienced no issues tied to horsepower, torque, starting, runnability. We haven't had any issues.
Excellent. Good to hear in both cases. Our next question is actually a couple of related questions to propane fuel costs. Obviously, there's been a lot of stories around the price of propane, particularly last winter with the quote-unquote polar vortex. Tom, could you share some insight on how you get good, consistent pricing? And could you also clarify whether the fuel prices that are being presented are on a gasoline gallon equivalent basis or if they are gallons of propane?
The price per gallon presented is the actual price of a gallon of propane. In general, you can expect to get about 10 or 15 miles per gallon less on propane, but that's just tied to the butane. Gasoline is a much higher burn content. So that is a per gallon price. The way we maintain consistent pricing, and like if you saw Carl's screenshot, it had propane at $2.99 a gallon, but that's Quick Trip selling it on a on a retail level. Any fleet that is operating or is going to operate propane vehicles, you're going to go to the suppliers and you're going to negotiate your own price per gallon, and that way it remains consistent, and it also is. It's not the number that everybody bases propane on out there in the industry. There's too many times people talk about propane being pricey, but it's because propane is really sold as, for barbecue grills, it's sold as heating, as it's sold at all the U-Hauls. If you just walk in and buy it in that format, the price is going to be different.
We're a company that has built a network of facilities and operations that support more than 400.
Oops. We okay, Pat?
Yes, we are. Please continue.
Okay. So the message there is that if you're going to run it, then you're going to go negotiate your prices with the suppliers.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that information. We have a couple of questions coming in that are almost tech support questions, so I don't want to ask you to sort of over the webinar troubleshoot people's individual questions, but I thought I'd maybe paraphrase them and see if you've experienced similar issues and how you would propose going about the process of determining sort of a root cause and troubleshooting these. Some of the aftermarket conversions, looks like natural gas conversions, have tanks that purge gas on warm days. Do you encounter, and this is probably a question for Carl, do you encounter purging or venting of gas, and how do you manage that or address that issue? And a similar related question, any battery issues associated with your vehicles in cold weather that are attributed specifically, you think, to the alternative, the fuel systems on the vehicles?
Okay. Well, on purging, I guess I'm not sure on purging. I guess we don't see a problem. I guess I don't know if that what the caller was referring to is due to an overpressurization or what it would be. Not sure what would cause it. We don't really see anything like that. Like I mentioned, most leakage that we see is revolves around the fueling, and as I indicated, we can limit or eliminate that by not by keeping tanks really full, really like you would a gasoline tank. In the winter up here, we tell our gas operators, don't run your tanks empty, and it really applies to natural gas. If I'm following the question, that's it. I mean, we just don't see a lot of leakage on these vehicles. On the other, as far as the battery, there is a challenge that these vehicles will crank longer. But again, we don't see any more battery problems with them than we do anything else. In the heavy duty world, and they crank longer, but still start easily, and just haven't noticed any problems.
And I guess maybe carrying on from there just a little bit, how have each of your fleets gone about trying to identify the sources of these problems? Are those activities done by your internal maintenance technicians? Are they done hand in hand with the conversion kit or vehicle OEMs? What's been the most successful strategy for addressing those issues and understanding the causes?
Well, hey, this is Tom. From our perspective on the propane vehicles, we unlike Carl, we don't have our own captive shops, so we take our vehicles to the end user or to a retail store, the dealers, for any maintenance or warranty issues.
For us, at Convenience or Quick Trip, where we do our own maintenance, we tend to see it, and we're fielding any call from a driver that has a problem, or we're dealing with it in-house. Now, to that, I will say that, and that's been one thing that I've been very pleased with is the supplier, whether it's OE or component manufacturer, fuel system manufacturers, when we have a concern, we have found extremely good response. If there's a legitimate concern with a component or any element, usually within a week of the phone call, I'll have their technical people in-house, and we'll be analyzing what's happening, trying to come to a solution, and typically we do very quickly. And so, I really commend the people that have been in this industry a long time and, have brought this technology to where it's at, and more importantly, to their commitment to seeing it go forward. So in that regard, I guess I'm very happy with what we've seen in addressing any problems that come up.
Great. One maybe high-level question, and then I'd be interested if you could give reason why for your answer. What's harder to deal with, extreme heat or extreme cold?
I guess I can go first on that. Yeah, I guess depends what your problem the problem is. I guess cold is the biggest challenge. It is with any piece of any motor vehicle from an operating standpoint. Now, heat is a bigger problem from a range standpoint. You're not going to get as if you go to fuel on a 90-degree day. You never get a tank or a cylinder completely full, but that diminishes the warmer it is and what you actually get in. So, we can see some challenges there. That on that 90-plus degree day, you might have to stop and fuel one extra time. So, different scenarios, but from an operational standpoint, it's definitely the cold.
From a propane perspective, we haven't experienced any issues in either one. I think what Carl means too is that any vehicle, gas, diesel, propane, natural gas, cold weather is always going to be your hardest start. But from the propane side, neither one has posed a challenge for us.
So we know that the cold weather, at least mild cold weather, can improve the power and fuel efficiency of a typical gasoline or diesel engine. It kind of condenses the air charge and makes it a little easier for the engine to breathe. In extreme cold weather, do you see significant changes, either benefits or disbenefits, for mileage or fuel economy in propane or natural gas? Carl, do you want to start with that?
Well, I guess we actually see overall, everything we do, we benchmark off diesel. That's the world we've known. Now, in the winter, I think that's true. I mean, your best running is a nice spring or fall day, moderate temperatures, and no wind and all of that. But what we see overall is in the winter, in the cold, we lose fuel economy and efficiency in every vehicle. Natural gas, we tend to lose a smaller percentage than we do with diesel. Now, part of that gets to the fuel difference. You know, essentially in the winter, we're running very close to the same fuel. If anything, it might have a few more heavies in it, might have a higher BTU content in the winter than it does in the summer. On the other hand, diesel, we're running blends, you know, whether it's number one, 70%, number two, and there's a big efficiency loss there, and that seems to be where the fuel economy loss comes in, is really more at the fuel level. Vehicles perform pretty much the same, and yes, those conditions are going to hit both technologies about the same, but we see an advantage really just because the change in the base fuel is much less with natural gas than it is in our diesel world.
Pat, from our perspective, we have not analyzed our MPG based on temperature.
There's been some commentary, you know, some information in the industry regarding propane that that your MPG increases, at least on an energy equivalent basis, over gasoline. Essentially, that the vehicle miles per energy equivalent gallon increases when you go from gasoline to propane. Do you see that similar effect in diesel?
Is that to Carl?
That'd be to Tom first on propane.
Well, most of my propane is replacing gasoline engine, not diesel.
And do you see the stated fuel economy increase on an energy equivalent basis?
Like I said, we have never analyzed how our propane vehicles, the MPG differs from climate to climate.
Great. And Carl, do you have any additional thoughts there on fuel economy change?
No, not beyond what I already expressed.
Okay. Well, I think we're coming to the end of our hour here. So I'd like to go ahead and wrap up the webinar here. I apologize if there were any questions that you submitted that we didn't get to today. I'd also like to extend my sincere thanks to our presenters, Tom Armstrong and Carl Schur, for joining us for a great conversation today on alternative fueled vehicle performance. Feel free to contact either of them or myself directly for any follow-up questions you may have. Our contact details will be included in the follow-up email that you will receive in the next couple of days. Most of all, thank you to our audience for joining us today. As a reminder, today's webinar will be available online for replay. You can link to it from the ACTA Expo website within the next day or two. So if others in your company were not able to join in, maybe result to a snow day or other extreme weather event, please feel free to send the link along to them as well. We hope to see you at ACTA Expo May 4th through 7th in Dallas. We are very excited to host this year's show in Texas, given that it's one of the largest markets for alternative fuel transportation in North America, particularly around propane and natural gas. There's just been tremendous growth in the activity of these markets, along with major developments in electric drive technologies, all very exciting stuff. We have 4 days of programming, and we have partnered with Propane Education Research Council, who we again thank for sponsoring this webinar, the Natural Gas Vehicle Global, also known as NGV Global, the Electric Drive Transportation Association, the North American Council on Freight Efficiency, DOE Clean Cities, and Business for Social Responsibility, among others, to bring ACTA Expo to you. The full speaker roster will be announced very soon, so stay tuned. As you can see on the slide in front of you right now, ACT Expo webinar participants are entitled to a $50 discount code on the registration with the code webinar50. Also, please remember to complete the brief survey that pops up once you exit the webinar. We greatly appreciate any of your feedback. Thank you again for tuning in today, and we look forward to seeing you in Dallas.